Hey everybody, this is Danny Davis, the Austin American-Statesman, and this is your Longhorn Confidential for Tuesday, October 15th. I'm joined today by Cedric Golden, David Eckert, and guys, there's really only one thing to talk about today, and that is the Texas-Georgia game on Saturday, 6:30 kickoff over at DKR ABC if you're watching at home, because it's a little expensive to get into the game this week. I've been seeing some tickets going for like $1,000. A good friend of mine was trying to post his for 1,100, and he's a upstanding citizen, so I know he's not trying to upcharge people. That's just what he legitimately thinks those tickets are worth. So if you can't watch it, we'll have plenty of analysis today. Let's get right into it. Texas still undefeated, 6-0. Number one in the coaches poll, Georgia, 5-1. Number four in the coaches poll. These are probably the two best teams in the SEC. So with all that being said, since you've been to a few Texas games in your lifetime, this is the biggest Texas game since blank.
Wow. It's the biggest Texas game since they play Washington in the CFP. But the biggest regular season Texas game, man, probably since they played Ohio State in, I guess it was 2018 when Joe Burrow brought an NFL team in here with Joe Brady calling the plays, and he had Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Just a NFL team, and the Texas Longhorns played great that night. They played great that night. It's probably the most anticipated since that one. But if we're talking about what's on the line, definitely the biggest since Washington. They can take control of the SEC. I know they don't play LSU this year, but LSU's got bigger fish to fry. They got some big games coming up. But Texas, if they win this game, it's right there for them. I know Arkansas, I know A&M, but it's going to be really interesting to see if they win this game. But as far as regular season, definitely since the LSU Tigers came in here in 2018.
David, as you've been studying up and trying to get caught up with this Texas program this last month or so, what have you found? What do you think this is? Same question to you.
Yeah, I will defer to said on the history stuff for sure. But when it comes to stakes, yeah, I think they played a couple real big ones at the end of last year. I think anytime you're playing for a conference title like they did and playing for a berth in the national championship game. But this is huge, and it's huge for both teams too, because something that I don't know if we've really discussed on our end, just because of how much this means to Texas, like this is a huge game for Georgia. Um, because if you're Georgia and you lose this game, all of a sudden you need like big time help to get into the SEC title game, which seem to get to just about every year. And you lose this game, all of a sudden you're kind of out of mulligans to get to that college football playoff. So for Texas, it's kind of a chance to announce yourself. And for Georgia, it's like, you know, you have a danger of unraveling a little bit. So huge game for both teams. I think it'll be really fun.
This is only the third top five matchup ever at in Austin. I'm gonna discount the 2006 Ohio State game just because that was Colt's second start is really early in the season. 1970 Arkansas, that was well before my time, although Texas loses that game. They didn't win a national championship that year. So obviously that's pretty important. It was their regular season finale when the Razorbacks came to town that year. I'm going to discount the LSU game a little bit just because in retrospect, obviously that's huge, but we didn't know that LSU was going to be that machine. I mean, we saw it that night, but we didn't, when they first came to town, we didn't know that they were going to be that LSU team. And obviously afterwards, we all left the press box being like, well, damn, look at the Tigers go. But I may just go back to last season and not even the Washington game, but I think that trip to Alabama obviously was
That's
huge
huge.
because Texas, we thought Texas might be a team on the rise, might that Steve may have this program going in the right direction. Alabama was Alabama, and Texas proved it that night. And both teams obviously made the CFP, so we both know that they're both top four teams. So as far as home games, maybe that LSU game, maybe the Arkansas game in 1970, but as far as overall, I'll just go Alabama last year. As far as this weekend, though, said we'll go to you again on this one. To go up first, if Texas wins, it's because blank had a huge game.
Nice. Oh, and a correction, that was 2019 LSU. It
Yep.
wasn't 2018, it was 2019. Um, wow. The secondary has got to have a huge game. So I'll point to Jade Barron, the leader back there, he and Michael Taft. Carson Beck, I watched that Alabama 41-34 loss to Alabama. He was horrible early on, but we got home in time. I forgot what Texas game was we covered that night, but we got home in time to see the end of that game, and he was just dropping dimes on that secondary. When he's right, he's as good as anybody. The Heisman hype is real. The top 10 overall pick hype is real. But if Texas can make him struggle, and on the back end, I'll go with Jade Barron, and then on the front end, how about Colin Simmons or Ethan Burke? One of those pass rushers. You see what they did to the freshman quarterback. They're not going to rattle a Carson Beck, but any quarterback doesn't want to get hit over and over again. So it's going to be a team effort. If they can get pressure on him, and one of those guys like Jade Barron can come up with a pick, a game-changing type play, then things will bode well for Texas. Not really worried as much about the offense, but I think the defense is going to have to really put some clamps on one of the best quarterbacks in the game to give Texas a really good chance to win this.
David, who's your pick for potential MVP if Texas wins this game?
Yeah, I'm with Ced because I think this is kind of the opposite of your typical Georgia team, right? You think about Kirby Smart, you think about these just defensive monsters that are going to run the ball and kind of score enough points to win, and that's not what this is. This is a really good offense and a team that has problems stopping you. So I think when you look at it from Texas's perspective, it has to be somebody on that defensive front. Whether it's Colin Simmons, Trey Moore breaking out, Anthony Hill, they kind of used him in a few different spots, that type of thing, against Oklahoma. Somebody to pressure Carson Beck. I covered a game at Georgia last year where I actually went back and counted, and Carson Beck was touched once.
Oh, that was a blowout. That was a blowout.
Yeah, yeah. So, you got to make him uncomfortable because if he sits back there forever, you're not going to have fun. So, and that offensive line is capable of doing that. They've done it before against good defenses. So, to me, it's hey, can you pressure him? And who's going to be the guy to do that?
I'm scared to go ahead and pick the big guy. Let's go with Steve Sarkisian. I mean, last year he went to Nick Saban's
Let's
house,
go, Daniel. Let's go.
knocked off Nick and kind of Nick's last home loss in his storied career. Kirby Smart's now the dean of the SEC coaches, and if Steve goes in there and knocks him off, he can say who's the captain now, and everyone's kind of gunning for Texas, and so. Obviously, Steve's going to be working, he's working Quinn back into the picture. May not have his top receiver if Isaiah Bond can't play this weekend. The running game is a little bit of an issue, but let's see what he can work up offensively. And obviously, we know Steve likes to get a little creative and a little aggressive sometimes for his own good with some of those fourth down calls or having Matthew Golden throw the ball twice against Oklahoma, including one of the worst passes we've seen in a long time. So we'll see if that aggressiveness pays off against Georgia. But I'm gonna be interested just to see how Steve kind of the game he calls offensively against this Georgia team, which has been suspect. I mean, they gave up 300 yards to Mississippi State passing yards last week. Granted, Mississippi State was playing from behind, so maybe the stats are a little inflated, but 300 yards is still 300 yards. So we'll see what happens there. We've mentioned Carson Beck a couple times. There's another fine quarterback on the Texas sidelines, Quinn Ewers. Dave, we'll start with you. Quinn, Carson, take your pick. Who's your guy? Who's a quarterback you'd roll with?
Wow, that's really tough. I would go with Carson Beck. Personally, to me, just the arm and the tools, but it's close, right? And maybe if Quinn gets healthy and gets in a rhythm, this is a game where he can outperform Beck. But if you're asking me to pick one as they are right now, I would pick Carson Beck.
Said
I go with Carson as well because he's played better and he hasn't missed any games. He's not rusty. Quinn Ewers, I believe, will bounce back. Quinn doesn't have too many bad games. And let's keep it real, 20 out of 29 ain't horrible, but he did miss some throws that he usually makes pretty easily. But Carson Beck has been better overall. Quinn needs to figure out how to get it back, get his groove back. He's got a plethora of receivers at his disposal. He's got good running backs. No one's sleeping on Quintravian Wisner anymore. That's a dude. That's a dude that runs angry. So, and he doesn't have to be Superman for Texas to beat Georgia. He's got a great offensive line. He's got weapons. He's got one of the best defenses in the country that have shown that they're good in sudden change. So he's just got to be Quinn Ewers. He doesn't have to be Peyton Manning to beat Georgia. So for me, if you ask me to pick one of the two, I'm taking Carson, but I really expect Quinn Ewers to play well in this game at home.
I think when it comes to quarterbacks, wins are only a statistic when you need them to be, and I need them to be for this argument. And the fact of the matter is, Quinn in these games just tends to be big game Quinn. And if you look at the resumes, Quinn has better wins on his resume than Carson Beck does. That is not up for debate. I mean, Carson, I think, has one top 10 victory in his career, and that was Ole Miss last year. I'm not going to count that Florida State game because that Florida State team had checked out by the time they got to the Orange Bowl. And, if Georgia wants to say, they checked out of the 2019 Sugar Bowl, we can say Florida State checked out of that Orange Bowl last year. But Quinn, he's beaten Alabama. Carson Beck hasn't. He went up to Michigan this past year. I mean, he won a conference championship last year, which is something Carson Beck and that Georgia team did not do. So I just like Quinn in these big games. Carson may be more toolsy. He may be more. He may be the better draft pick, which is all fine and good. But Quinn just seems to come up big in these games, and I would suspect he does the same thing this weekend. Although I think it's gonna be fun to watch both quarterbacks do their thing. I don't think either fan base can complain about the quarterback they have under center this weekend. But that's gonna do it for us today. We're gonna get out of here, start preparing for this Georgia game. Maybe I'll go find a way to sell my press pass since they're going for $1,000 or whatever they're going for. I'm kidding, John Bianco. Don't trip me in my press pass. But On Second Thought podcast comes out on Thursday morning. What are we doing this week? Who's stopping by? What are we talking about?
Well, we're going to be joined by the illustrious Paul Feinbaum this week. Just texted with him, and the mouth of the South is going to grace us with his presence. And that drops on Thursday morning, and then later that afternoon, I will be on the Paul Feinbaum show. He's washing my hand, I'm washing his. It's all love in the South, all love in the SEC. What took us so long to get here, David Eckert? We just needed David Eckert to bring some SEC to Austin so we could get in the SEC. That's what was keeping us away. We love the Big 12, but don't we love us some SEC right now, Daniel?
Yes, sir. So yeah, be sure to check that out on Thursday morning, and check out Ced on the Feinbaum show later that day. And throughout the week, we're gonna have tons of Texas Georgia content leading up to the game. Obviously, on game day, we'll have plenty of stuff, and post game, statesman.com. It's where you can read all the stuff you need to read. But that's gonna do it for us. Thanks for watching us on statesman.com or on YouTube, or listening to us wherever you get your podcast. We'll see y'all down the road. Deuces.